My therapist told me I had OCD. I told her she was crazy. The worst part is no one's going to notice this, like, at all. I kind of want to leave this in. We're 3 minutes into the video, and I have not started talking. Well, I have about bullshit that doesn't matter. So, are you struggling to sell your work? Believe me, I did it. Months and literal years passed pouring effort into designs that no one even ever saw. I seriously went so long without selling anything, it's honestly a miracle that I never gave up. But then, everything changed when I somewhat randomly stumbled on this strategy that I'm going to talk about in this video. This isn't just a bunch of theory, this is real actionable advice. By the way, stick around to the end. I've compiled a list of helpful tips that are applicable to everything we're going to talk about, and they should supplement your knowledge that you learn here even more, and probably give you a better chance at succeeding. So I'm the owner and operator of the jewelry company Mythic, and I've been in the jewelry game for almost 7 years now. And what's more is I'm completely self-taught, which is a real testament that anybody can do this if they put their mind to it. I seriously believe if you apply what I'm gonna put in this video and combine it with your own intuition, you'll make your first $1,000 too. And the thing is, once you make that first 1,000, everything suddenly becomes real. It's the proof that you can build a life for yourself doing what you love. Because if you already made $1,000, then you can make 2,000 and then 4,000. And I feel like that first initial 1,000 is probably the hardest because I guess just like anything else, building traction is the most difficult part of something. And it's not just about what the money tells you psychologically, like that proof that you can make it, but you'll also gain literal traction in the outside world. Like people will start to know you, you'll have repeat customers and stuff like that. So if you just stick with the first initial phase and you get through it, it'll be probably easier as you go forward. So here's my story. I started off making jewelry in my parents' garage. Yes, bro, I know how generic that sounds. Thinking I'm Jeff Bezos over here. So yeah, I started in my parents' garage. I had no clue what I was doing. It took me probably a week straight just to figure out even how to melt the metal, which sounds really stupid because to melt metal, you put fire on metal and it make metal go melt. But it was a heat issue and I just couldn't get it hot enough because I was using the wrong torch and I didn't realize. And you really need metal to be in a very liquid state to flow. So after a couple of weeks of failures, I finally got a ring to cast all the way around. I kept getting half rings like over and over again, and man, this was a struggle. But once I got this full ring, let me tell you, I was pretty pumped. Like, this probably was the root for everything. But on the other hand, it was just a simple silver ring. And all the other people I was looking online that were selling stuff were making these crazy intricate designs. I'm sure you've seen, stuff that inspires you. And there's this disconnect between you and those people. Just taking my case, like, I was proud of what I made, but it was a little silver ring, like just a plain ring. It wasn't even properly shaped because I messed it up a little bit and there's grain in it, all that. And things that I was inspired by were crazy in comparison. And so it's like, how do you even, there's that thought, that evil thought that's like, you can't do it, it's impossible. They were born this way, but no. I mean, if you think about it logically, they were in our place at one point or another. So if that's where you're at now and you have that feeling, you just have to let it go, which is hard to do, but it's necessary. That's all there is to it. You're not going to make it if you give into those thoughts. And those thoughts will always be there, but it's your reaction to them that will determine their power over you. So because of this difference between my super simple and frankly poor designs compared to everything else people were selling, I had no idea how I was going to sell my work. So I let that inspire me. I didn't let that, ruin the vibe. So I invested in better tools and I spent about $100 or $200. And I always mention this, the biggest impact you can make on your work, like in terms of the tools you upgrade to, is a rotary tool. So I got a Dremel originally, but this is a much more fancy one, but the concept's the same. So there's a motor hanging up there that you can't see, but essentially what this does is, here, let me show you. So this is a sanding bit. It's just a little cone that'll sand down silver, but you can put tons of other things, almost infinite things like drill bits and polishers and sanding drums and everything. So you just put it in here and then it'll rotate. So it's basically like a Swiss Army knife on steroids. So once you have these, you can do exponentially more things. It's honestly nuts how much of a difference having a rotary tool will make. So I would prioritize that to the highest degree for the tools you're going to need. This allowed me to get a lot more creative and start doing just more interesting designs in general. Still though, no one was seeing them. You know, I would show my friends and family, but it would basically end there because I didn't have any sort of traction. And so no one was seeing my work and therefore it wasn't selling. And I should note that, especially in the beginning, sales weren't and shouldn't be super important because improving really should be the main driver. And if you care only about the money, it's probably just not the right thing to do. And it's just going to be a huge struggle. But that said, part of the dream for me was, you know, eventually to be able to make a living for myself while not working for someone and making jewelry instead. And then furthermore, by selling stuff, that was going to allow me to upgrade my tools and get more materials and stuff like that. So it was sort of necessary to start selling my work. But again, even though I was making all these newer, cooler designs, still nobody was seeing them. I could have probably tried paying for ads, but still that probably would have been costly, which I didn't have the money for. And also, I hadn't really made a name for myself. I had nothing unique to offer, so I couldn't really sell silver ring. You know, even the spiky one, it is really cool, but the amount of effort I put into that, I couldn't sell for too high of a price because I hadn't really made a name for myself, and a brand behind the work will command a much steeper price for a number of reasons. And so I had to figure something out, but I never did. Well, for a long time. Man, within this time, this is probably the, you know, darkest time in my path. I wasn't doing poorly or anything, but it was sad because I sort of just gave up. And it was subtle too, which is tough. I just slowly stopped identifying with it. And I talk about this in another video, so I won't really get into the actual story here. But just know that I went for years without selling a single thing. It was rough. So hey, if that's you, I get it. Just hang in there. People always say not giving up is the key to success or whatever, and kind of is if you think about it. There were so many opportunities for me to give up within 2 years, maybe more. I don't know, a long time without selling a single thing. I don't even feel like I'm that mentally tough of a person, so it's like I don't know how I didn't give up, honestly. But then, almost randomly, I began to get interested in a new style of jewelry, and there's something about this style that I didn't realize at the time, but would make a world of difference. See, up until this point, like I said, I never really made a name for myself. There was no brand behind my work. And so that means people weren't searching for me. They weren't searching for my jewelry. They were just searching for jewelry. And even though the designs I was making were creative and unique, and I believed in them, they were a little bit too random. They could have maybe potentially sold given enough time, maybe 3 or 4 years. But the problem is that not enough people were searching for what I was offering in the first place. So the strategy itself sounds almost too simple, and that is sell popular stuff. Give me a minute, I'll explain. So I was playing video games at the time, like RPG games, and there were weapons that I was interested in. And I thought it'd be cool to have one of the swords or war axes, whatever, on a necklace. So I started making those. It was when I started creating jewelry that was either inspired or paying homage to something that was already popular. And this is the key. By creating things that people are already interested in, you won't even have to create ads because people are already naturally searching for these things. Alright, so to make this more clear, I'll give you an example that's related to my own work. You can extrapolate the idea here to any category or theme that better suits your type of work. So within this general weapon/fantasy theme, I would research this and pick out particular things that are really popular. So in my theme, for example, a katana is extremely popular with my demographic. But of course, this means that there are many examples to choose from. So Adding another katana pendant will just get lost in the sea of all the others. But by putting your own unique spin on the already popular thing, that's the key. You want a unique spin on things so that people will be incentivized to check out the rest of your work. So when people are searching those terms up, they'll see your work, and whatever your unique twist on it is, they'll be like, that's cool. I've never seen my favorite thing look like this before. That's really interesting. In fact, one of my best sellers is actually because of this phenomenon. So it turns out ancient Egyptian Ankh pendants are pretty popular, but if you just try and go sell one that looks like the rest, you're not really going to have much success. So I made an Ankh pendant within my own personal style. And since it inherently doesn't look like the rest, people that are already searching for an Ankh pendant might see mine and think, hey, that's a cool Ankh pendant. I've never seen anything like that before. And they might check it out. They were initially interested in the Ankh, but they end up getting drawn to it because of the style that I added to it. But quick note, you don't have to completely sacrifice your vision of what you want your brand to look like and start making things that other people want. You can still make things that you want to make, but by having these things that are inspired by things that are already popular, they act as a fishing hook for the rest of your work. Then the more of these hooks that you have cast out at sea, the more viewers you'll catch to reel into the rest of your work. I didn't even mean to make a metaphor right there. That was crazy. Yo. So then after doing this, eventually you'll have enough natural traction where you then can start to rely completely on your original work because you'll have made that name for yourself. People will already know who you are, and you'll have repeat customers and just things like that that will naturally make people search for your work instead of the original popular thing. So, made it to the end. Like I said, I have 3 tips that I would have told my younger self and I think are really applicable for what we just talked about. The first one was what I'm doing now, actually, and was one of the hardest things in this entire 7-year journey. Like, seriously. And I feel like this is probably a common fear a lot of people can relate to. And so I would really, really take this one seriously because I pushed it aside for years and it just hindered my success. It just made things come a lot slower. So that is to start posting consistently on social media. Key right away. I got too lost in the idea of trying to chase the aesthetic of an already established brand. So I was trying to make everything look professional, super clean. And the thing is sure, it looked nice, but I was actually shooting myself in the foot because on one hand, I would just create this state of analysis paralysis for myself. And, I would just not post anything because it didn't live up to that, illusion that I had in my head. And then also people, I think this is like a sort of overall market shift that's been happening in like the past 5 years or so. People are starting to appreciate the real raw artists that create work with their own hands versus some polished corporation trying to sell to them. And it gives you more of a story, like leaving those mistakes in there. Trying to chase this professional image honestly makes things sterile and less appealing. It was when I stopped caring about how I would get my work out there and just if I got it out there. This is when I began to see some pretty dramatic changes. All right, number 2 is you need a USP, unique selling point. I touched on this earlier in the video, and this can be anything you want. It's your own unique spin on things. To a degree, the more specific, the better. I feel like a mistake that's super common in marketing in general is trying to target a large audience, which sounds logical. The more people you can reach, the more you'll sell, right? But it doesn't really work like this. It's more counterintuitive because by appealing to a smaller audience, you'll relate to them more. You'll have a stronger connection with them. You'll resonate more strongly with them. Buyers that feel like a brand relates to them are way more likely to buy something than just something they see from another brand because they think it looks cool. For example, my USP with Mythic is the mythology theme in general. And this cuts a lot of potential customers off for me because there's a ton of people interested in jewelry, but not nearly as many that are interested in mythology. But for that slimmer group of people that are both interested in mythology and jewelry, it'll make them, in a sense, twice as more interested and therefore maybe twice as more likely to buy. And this can keep happening if you were to divide it into another interest that might make them 4 times more likely to buy. or at least 4 times more likely to relate to it, which is a crucial step in getting someone to buy your work. Of course, there's a limit to this. You can't like divide your audience 10 times to where you're only selling to a potential maximum audience of like 10,000 people. You know, that's just too little. And then of course, once you take over a very niche market, then you can start expanding elsewhere. But by focusing niche, you'll relate to your customers way more, and they'll just relate to you more and be more likely to buy from you. All right, and then number 3, also kind of sounds counterintuitive, but cheap tools are more expensive. To any degree you can, invest in quality tools right off the bat. Cheap tools are inexpensive up front, but you'll end up paying more for them in the longer term because 1, they'll simply need replacement because they're gonna break, and then 2, better tools just allow you to get jobs done quicker, and so you'll save that time and therefore potentially money over a week or a month, because all that saving time will add up to something significant. Now, there are some tools that are just flat out expensive, like a rotary tool. The one I mentioned earlier was probably $400 or so. So for things like that, then buying a knockoff might be necessary if you're just getting started with all of this, but I would really try to avoid this as much as possible. So yeah, if you made it this far, you're a real one. Thank you so much. I hope that this helps you out. If you have any questions or anything, or need more advice than I gave in this video, feel free to reach out to me, drop a comment. If I have the time, I'll try to respond to them. And yeah, thanks again for watching.